So let's jump right into a huge question, one that's on a lot of people's minds. Is the American century actually over? We're going to unpack all the arguments, the ones for and the ones against, so you can really see the whole picture. You know, a lot of historians and economists are looking at the United States right now and wondering, is it following a pattern? A very old, very predictable path of decline that basically every great power before it has walked down. Let's see what history has to say about that. And that's because when you really zoom out and look at the grand sweep of time, one lesson becomes, well, kind of brutally clear. I mean, think about it. From the Romans to the British Empire, being number one has always been temporary. So the real question isn't if power is going to shift, but how it's going to shift and when. Okay, so to get a handle on the present, we've got to look to the past. And a lot of historians believe that empires are kind of like people. They have a life cycle, a surprisingly predictable pattern of birth, growth, and eventually, decay. So get this. There is this historian, Sir John Glubb, who studied over a dozen empires. I mean, everyone from the Assyrians to the British. And he noticed something absolutely startling. They almost all had a similar lifespan of about 250 years. That's roughly 10 generations. It didn't matter what the technology was or where they were in the world. Glubb broke this cycle down into 6 stages. It all kicks off with this energetic age of pioneers, then moves through conquest and commerce. But here's where things get interesting. After that comes an age of affluence, which can lead to an age of intellect, where maybe there's more debating than doing. And that, he argued, eventually leads to an age of decadence. The multi-trillion-dollar question, right, is where does the US fall on this timeline? Okay, so with that historical pattern in our back pocket, let's shift gears from theory to the cold, hard data, because there are several economic indicators right now that are really fueling this debate about America's future. And one of the biggest ones is the US dollar itself. You've probably heard this term being thrown around a lot, de-dollarization. All it really means is the idea that other countries are slowly but surely starting to move away from using the US dollar for everything, for trade, for their financial reserves, everything. And this chart really paints a picture of what's happening. Now, to be clear, the dollar is still king. It's the top currency by a long shot. But its share of what central banks are holding around the world has dropped to a 20-year low. We're seeing them start to diversify, buying up more gold and other currencies. Now, another huge warning sign, one that the historian Paul Kennedy really zeroed in on, is something he calls imperial overstretch. This is the classic trap, right? A great power has military commitments all over the globe, and they become so huge, so expensive, that they start to drain the economy back home. So what does that overstretch look like in practice? Well, look at this number, 877. That is the number of U.S. military bases on foreign soil. To put that into perspective, the U.S. maintains more foreign bases than every other country in the world, combined. But, the challenges aren't just coming from the outside. Many analysts would argue that the most serious threats to American power are actually coming from within. Take the investor Ray Dalio. He has a phrase for what he sees happening inside the U.S., a classic deadly combination. He's pointing to things like massive government debt, huge divides in wealth, and deep political polarization, the kind of internal problems that have weakened great powers throughout history. And it's not just about money and politics. The historian Niall Ferguson sees a different kind of decay. He argues that one of the West's core strengths, the rule of law, has gotten so tangled up and complicated that it's become what he calls a rule of lawyers instead. So you see how these ideas stack up? You've got Dalio's economic and social fractures, and then Ferguson adds this other layer. He calls it the Great Degeneration, this idea that core institutions are becoming so complex and inefficient that it gets harder and harder for the country to adapt and innovate, stifling the very things that made it so successful in the first place. Okay, I know what you're thinking. After all that, the historical patterns, the economic warnings, the cracks from within, it sounds pretty grim, right? But hold on. That is only one half of the story. America still has an incredibly strong hand to play. Which brings us right to the critical question. Is this decline a done deal? Is it absolutely inevitable? Well, not if you ask the people who point to America's very unique and very durable advantages. So, what's the case for American resilience? Well, it is powerful. The U.S. is still the world's largest economy.
It has a massive lead in technology and higher education, not to mention an unrivaled military. And then there are the unique advantages, like being protected by two giant oceans and having a younger, growing population compared to rivals like China. Oh, and yeah, that dollar, it's still the currency everyone turns to.
So where does all this leave us? Well, not with a simple yes or no answer, that's for sure. What we have is this incredible dynamic tension, with one set of powerful forces pulling towards decline and another equally powerful set pulling towards resilience. You can almost picture it like a giant tug of war for the 21st century. On one side of the rope, you have all those headwinds we talked about: military overstretch, the changing role of the dollar, deep political divisions, and decaying institutions. But on the other side, pulling back just as hard, are those enduring pillars of American strength: its geography, its innovative economy, its demographic edge, and its unmatched military power. So in the end, we're not left with a clean answer. Instead, we're left with this enormous question for the future. Will this century be one of a slow fade for American influence, a rapid fall, or a surprising and powerful renewal? The final answer isn't buried in some history book. It's being written right now by the choices that are being made today.